I'm Jessica, the museum guide, and yes, those are hundreds of skulls behind me. Today, I'm at St. Leonard's Church in Hythe, visiting their ossuary, the largest collection of medieval bones in England. On our tour today, we have witches' marks, ancient trepanation, Roman circus dwarves, Anglo-Saxon mysteries, a cavern of bones, and modern body snatching. Happy Halloween season, everyone. Down on the southeastern corner of England, you'll find a quaint and unusual little town called Hythe, once famous as one of Kent's Cinque Ports, bustling medieval harbours that welcomed traders and explorers alike from the continent to this island. Here, I visited a very curious place, perfect for our spooky Halloween season, one of the largest and best preserved collection of ancient human skulls and bones in Britain. It's one of only 2 ossuaries, that is, bone stores, in the country. The other is in the Holy Trinity Church in Rothwell, Northamptonshire. This is St. Leonard's Church, Hythe, and today we're going to explore the church, its churchyard, home to some fascinating gravestones, and most importantly, its ossuary, home to between 2,000 and 4,000 sets of skeletal remains. This is something that we see more often on the continent, of course, the catacombs in Paris, which I have a video about, but also things like the Sedlak Ossuary in Kutna-Hora, Czech Republic, or the Capuchin Monastery in Rome. I've been to those before, many years before I had this channel. But somehow seeing this here, just down the road from where I live, it's an extremely sobering moment. This is a fascinating relic of medieval history, and it's just an hour from London. But in this town, historically known for pirates, smuggling, Viking battles, and Anglo-Saxon wars, the age-bleached bones of people like you and me sit quietly in an ancient church. As you can see here from this sign, this is not meant to be a morbid place, but a place of hope and light. According to St. Leonard's, quote, "To encounter human mortal remains can be a profound and fascinating experience, enabling us to learn about historic attitudes to death and to reflect on our own thoughts and feelings about life." If you're new to my channel, welcome. I post detailed tours of museums, art galleries, churches, and cemeteries, and today, this is truly a mix of all those things. If you like this video and you want to see more, I'll link some related tours along the way. Just keep your eye on the top right corner for those. For even more content like this, head over to my Patreon for all kinds of bonus content, including at least one extra video a month. In September, my patrons got to watch a tour of the National Portrait Gallery, and in October, I'm going to show them a tour of my favorite spooky and haunted objects in the British Museum. I'd love it if you joined me. Now let's get back to Hythe, which is an Old English word that means haven or safe place, and to this imposing church located up on its hill. This is St. Leonard's Hythe, founded in the late 11th century and today a Grade 1 listed building. Let's move inside to have a look at a few neat details before we head to the crypt. The tower at its western end was destroyed by an earth tremor in 1739, and it was restored in 1750. I find that really unusual. Earth tremor or earthquake, that's really unusual in the UK. Interestingly, St. Leonard is the patron saint of prisoners, women in labor, barrel makers, that is coopers, blacksmiths, and captives. As we wander around, we'll see the gravestones inset into the floor, which is just like any church of this age. We can see this early Norman doorway here. This was likely once an external door. I'll bring that up again later. And it's surrounded by reused Roman masonry, making parts of this building even more historic. As I wandered around this impressive structure, I was delighted to find some medieval graffiti depicting ships, which of course would have been a common sight from up here on the hill. We would have seen impressive 13th and 14th century sailing ships pulling in and out of the harbor below. I love medieval graffiti in churches. Remember, these walls would have been brightly colored, and And some experts and archaeologists believe that these personal expressions of faith and artistry were condoned and maybe even encouraged by church authorities. As I was admiring this graffiti, the church docent noticed my interest and pointed out these carpenter's marks, so you can see how they would tally the different types of work that they completed. He also showed me these witches' marks. Witches' marks are what are known as apotropaic marks, that is, symbols that can avert bad luck or evil. These likely date from the 16th or 17th century, when belief in witchcraft was a part of daily life, and symbols like this were thought to ward away bad spirits. Let's now move to the ossuary, located under the chancel in 4 arched bays. It's kind of strange. Instead of this being below ground, like the catacombs in Paris that I visited in this video, it's at ground level to the side of the church. You can even see it as we walked past the family vaults just outside. It's very unusual. As I head inside, check out these old grave markers. They really look Anglo-Saxon in design. You can see now that I'm definitely not underground. I actually had to come up a few stairs to get to this door. Here I am, instantly greeted by 2 arched walls of skulls. Just take a moment to notice this. This is really unusual in an English church. While the age of this ossuary is debated, earliest references to this collection of bones date back to 1678 by Samuel Jeake, the town clerk of Rye. Just 1 year later, Reverend Broom, chaplain to the Cinque Ports, described a, quote, orderly pile of dead men's bones in the charnel house, and drawings date back to the 18th century. People were producing tourist postcards about this ossuary as early as 1900, so curiosity in this site is nothing new. We're carrying on a long tradition by being here. Speaking of lovely little details for tourists, I just love the way this skull has been hollowed to make way for this little robin's nest. Maybe this will be my Christmas card this year. It's perfect. Just as the date is hotly contested, so too is the original purpose of the space and who it houses. Some say that these bones, which include around 1,000 skulls arranged on shelves and 8,000 long bones arranged into an impressive pile measuring 7.5 meters or 22 feet in length. It's also around 6 feet wide and 6 feet high. Some say these are from men who died in the Battle of Hastings, which is not too far away. Other common theories in the past was that these were the bodies of invading Saxons killed in a battle in AD 455, or that they're from Danish pirates, or even from unfortunate victims of the Black Death in the 14th century. However, that last one is quite unlikely, as victims of the plague were usually buried in quicklime to help hasten their decomposition. And I'll link my video about strange churchyards in London just above. It features a massive plague pit. All of these theories aside, we need to turn to who else but the archaeologists, and osteologists to be precise. After all, there is no way that they're going to let this rich site of data go uninvestigated. Hythe was part of an osteologist project from 2009 to 2012. They analyzed the skulls that you see here on the shelves, and they found out a lot of very interesting data. For instance, there's a higher proportion of females than males here, and around 10% of the skulls belong to juveniles. But what does all this data mean? Well, they believe that the ossuary is filled with the skeletal remains of Hythe residents who died over a long period of time, likely centuries. They were probably originally buried in the churchyard and then dug up around the 13th century when the church was extended. At that point, they were taken to a charnel house which stood in the churchyard. Charnel houses were very common in the medieval period, and they were designed to house bones that were disturbed when new graves were dug, or in this case, when new buildings were constructed. Remember, cremation was not accepted by the church in this period. Most people believed that there needed to be some physical remains for people to be resurrected at the end of days. As skulls and thigh bones are the most robust, they are often the ones to survive. While charnel houses are still common in some countries, you can find them in any Greek churchyard, they fell out of use in England around the 16th century. These ones, however, were already a local curiosity, and the church decided to keep them. Remember, Samuel Jeake and Reverend Brome had already written about them in the 18th century. That said, it seems like far too many bones to have just come from Hythe only. So the ossuary probably includes bones from 3 other graveyards in the area that fell out of use by around the year 1500. So while Black Death and pirates and soldiers are all very exciting theories, they are, ultimately, just fanciful myths. These recent osteological investigations are far from the first. People have been fascinated by these bones for centuries. The first scientific study was carried out on the bones in 1908. They conducted craniometry, which means that they measured 30 different dimensions of the skulls and came to believe that at least some were of Italian descent. They posited that this could represent a possible Roman link, owing to the nearby Roman port, which was called Portus Lemanus. We do need to take this with a grain of salt, though. Those Victorians loved their calipers and measuring people's heads to try to learn things about race. I'll be talking about this in my upcoming video on death masks and phrenology. The 21st century studies indicate that some of the people here are of Scandinavian descent, and as you can see here in this case, 1 or 2 of the skulls are believed to be of African origin, based on the shape of the skull sutures in the palate. It's wild to me that no isotope analysis studies have been carried out, but hopefully that will happen sometime soon. Let's have a look at some of these bones in specific to learn about injury and disease. As I was shown by the lovely and engaging tour guide, John, let's all take a moment to appreciate his fantastic shirt. It was given to him by his son-in-law. These display cases also demonstrate evidence of medieval injury and disease, and they can teach us a lot about the lifestyles of people living in this area throughout time. Throughout the shelves and the cases, we can see a few different skulls that have holes in them. This skull has a hole right through the top, which could have been the result of trepanation. That is, a surgical drilling through the skull. People have trepanned their skulls for thousands of years. There's evidence of it in many ancient cultures, and people still do it today, believe it or not, for spiritual or health reasons. Some say it relieves pressure and allows you to achieve a higher plane of human existence. But as the great medical history podcast Sawbones says, don't drill a hole in your head. That said, this hole could have also been caused by a blow from a sharp object, such as a dagger's, and they know that because of the radiating fractures inside the skull. Here's another skull with a severe dent caused by a blunt object, and this one here shows an injury from a slicing blow, probably a sword at the back of the head. What I always find fascinating is that we can tell that this slice didn't kill the person. We can see evidence of healing on the bone, which meant that the person lived longer after their injury.
These people were only small. They were only 5'4", 5'6".
Oh, interesting.
And that's somebody 5'4", but that's somebody 5'10".
Yeah.
So there were exceptions.
There were taller people.
That joint there should be like one of these. That person must have been in agony with that.
Oh,
My
wow.
gosh, you'd be round the doctor in a new hip. I mean, that's cancer, a sign of cancer, not necessarily in the head, but could be somewhere in the body. This one's been had an injury there before death, and it's healed. And this one is after death. That could have been done by a spade when they dug it out of the ground. Mm-hmm. Their body is a wonderful thing and will heal. If you break a bone, you just bind it together, and yes, it will heal.
There is one really strange statistic here in the Hythe ossuary, and that is the proportion of skulls that show evidence of cribra orbitalia. This is a symptom of a chronic iron deficiency anemia that's caused by either poor diet or infections. We can see these tiny pinprick holes around the eye sockets in someone who had cribra orbitalia. Now, we'd expect to see around 10% of the skulls affected by this. That's the average across the country from skulls of this age. But it is in a whopping 22% of the Hythe skulls, with an even higher proportion in the skulls of young people. What the heck? I mean, that's over a 220% increase over typical. Well, maybe we know why. Another common indicator of this disease is actually malaria, which occurred in marshy or swampy areas, and Hythe sits on the edge of Romney Marsh. This area would have been particularly afflicted by that mosquito-borne illness. Just a quick note on the teeth. Their quality varies greatly, but about 10% of these people lost at least one tooth before death. I would think it would be higher, actually.
The teeth are remarkable. The teeth are remarkable because there's no disease on the teeth.
Interesting.
They didn't have sugar.
Interestingly, dental osteology has also helped clear up two long-standing myths around some of the smallest skulls in the collection. For years, these were thought to have been those of performing circus dwarves in a Roman circus in the area, and this was a beloved piece of local lore. However, a forensic odontologist has studied these specimens and determined that these skulls actually belong to children, aged 4 and around 6 years old, based on their teeth development. Now look down here. We can see some medieval statuary now stored here in the ossuary. I find these fascinating. Let's look at number 6 here, this big boy. In medieval times, there were more than 30 statues of saints in St. Leonard's Church. Remember, they would have been brightly colored. However, they were removed from the church by Puritans after the Reformation. This guy would have been a big one. Now, number 7's quite hard to tell. He's in pretty bad condition, but he may have been a corbel supporting the old roof, and he's thought to be sticking out his tongue. These other two here, 8 and 9, are grotesques that were placed on the outside of the church to ward off evil spirits. Number 8 here probably dates all the way back to the 13th century, and almost certainly came from the tower, which, remember, fell due to that weird earthquake I told you about. Now, let's say goodbye to the ossuary for now. And just before we finish our tour, let's take a few moments to walk around the churchyard. When you do come to visit St. Leonard's, make sure you don't miss the churchyard. It's really beautiful, a lovely place to poke around, or you could even stop and eat your lunch here. I noticed this fantastic old grave with a skull memento mori dating back to 1728. Remember, these skulls on graves usually mean something like, remember that you too shall die, so that you continue to live a pious and spiritual life while you're here on earth. This grave belongs to Ralph Heron, his wife Margaret, his 2 daughters, and their son Thomas. I rarely see marked graves this old, so this one is really special. But I especially wanted to show you these lozenge graves over here. Lozenge graves are quite common in Kent churchyards, although there are a few that I know of in London's churchyards as well, and down in Sussex. They were made famous by Charles Dickens in the opening pages of Great Expectations. These ones here at St. James Church in Cooling near Rochester are often called Pip's graves, because Dickens describes the lozenge graves by the door as, quote, little stone lozenges, each about 1.5 feet long, which were arranged in a neat row beside their parents' graves. They're smaller and were more affordable than chest tombs, but they served much the same purpose. They offered more protection to the grave from wear, and of course, from body snatchers. Now on that note, let's finish our tour today with a modern tale of body snatching, but very unusual and much more recent. See, back in 2018, 21 skulls were stolen from the Crypt. Between 4 p.m. on Sunday, July 15th and 10:40 a.m. the next day, someone used bolt cutters to open this door to the church, and they made off with the skulls. There was no other theft or vandalism. No one is sure what happened to them, but they were likely sold to collectors on the black market. See, human skulls can fetch quite a pretty penny for decoration, or maybe other purposes, slightly more nefarious, and keeping with our Halloween theme. And with that in mind, we'll say goodbye. Well, that's the end of our tour. I hope you've enjoyed exploring this true oddity on the Kentish coast as much as I've enjoyed showing it to you. And I'll see you the next time I'm at the Crypt.